Hello, everybody. This is Swiss. Today, I would like to cover what has happened yesterday during the discussion around the somewhat controversial proposal in the DAO. I think this has been the topic of the day, and I would like to do a quick recap of what I have taken from this conversation. I hope you stay with me, and we'll continue after the intro. Let's go. What an interesting day, and I think there were quite a few emotions involved yesterday as well. I think it's been a great case study to meet for the very first time and see how a potential consensus finding on a new topic could actually, play out. And I think we did hit a few walls. I think we had a few successes. I think we've seen where some of the traps could be, and I've definitely noticed that the fact that we are within a metaverse still mimics a real world situation a lot of the times. So we are quite different from other projects that are implementing the DAO. I think we're just so much closer to a real life replica situation. But in any case, I think in summary, we had two camps that came to the meeting, people who were in favor of pooling and redirecting voting power from one account to another account. And the initial proposal that we have seen had two specific points that, the first point was there was a security concern where people would hold a significant amount of assets in cold storage, not in their MetaMask wallet, and they would have liked to bridge that gap without connecting their cold storage to the web, but by just allocating their voting power to a different Ethereum address. And apparently, for them, that mechanism, that snapshot, our new underlying system for the DAO, apparently that snapshot system offers an option of delegating that voting power. So this was, it seems like, the primary concern where everything started, but the person who has designed the proposal has also added a second point, and the second point really kind of triggered a lot of people, and maybe it triggered a lot of fears, and a lot of discussions were really around the second point. And the second point was referring to the idea of, hey, and I think a lot of the districts and larger players in Decentraland, really for them this was an issue that we may not have been aware of, is that they have all of these people owning land and assets under their umbrella, and all of those people are not active players. These are people, these are investors, and what they wanted to do is to use that motion and include it in the second point, that they would have the possibility to pool all of these assets and use their voting power share um, to channel it into one single Ethereum address, and then that one person controlling that Ethereum address would have that accumulated, aggregated voting power of hundreds of people. And this was the controversial point where a lot of people said that, yeah, maybe this could lead to a lot of potential abuse and pitfalls that we could not necessarily anticipate right now. They might seem like unlikely today, but could actually pose a real threat to Decentraland. So the whole conversation kind of was really, around the second point, I would say. I think people agreed that if there is a security concern, we should find a solution. Whether that solution should open up, the gateways for all of these potential problems raised in conjunction with the second point, that was at question. So, there was a lot of back and forward. There was very little time to express and develop your own point of view in the conversation. So people, just had a few minutes to briefly state some of their opinions, and it was, I think it was it was fairly good. It was fairly good, but it was also frustrating because there was very little exchange just due to how many people were in the call. So I've I've spent some significant amount of time thinking through some of the things we discussed, and I always try to take both sides and see where they're coming from and what their motivation is, and if they're right. Maybe they're right. Maybe what they want to do actually makes sense, because a lot of the times people miscommunicate. A lot of people in Decentraland are coming from a technical background and they do not necessarily communicate on a very high level. They may be very articulate and very knowledgeable, but they do not necessarily often have that empathy for the other party and an understanding for the general sentiment of a community, and they might just be focused more on their area of responsibility, their particular interests, and this can come over very often as an egoistic trait by people who are more community focused and maybe kind of looking out for a long-term game. I don't know, this is kind of a difficult area to discuss because we didn't really have a whole lot of time to get to know each other, and a lot of people met for the very first time. A lot of people come from very different backgrounds, and so I don't want to speculate a whole lot on that, but it definitely felt like the front froze at some point, and after some additional research I realized maybe it didn't have to be that way. Maybe we didn't go far enough in learning about DAOs and how they function and what other people do with it, and if what other people do with it could apply to Decentraland, or whether Decentraland is such a different case because it is a metaverse, that those ideas do not apply. Some people brought in the idea of a liquid democracy, and I think initially, when I read about that idea, I found it interesting, and I think some points that it raises are very valid. One of the points is you do not want to have people who do not understand a specific area to vote in that area because they will vote randomly for something that they do not understand. It would make sense for them to be able to delegate their vote to someone who is an expert in that area and that they trust. So I kind of agree with that idea. I think this is not bad logic. The question was, in the Decentraland context, would that actually play out? Is this what this will result in, or do we have a different situation there? And I think in the Decentraland context, we have to understand that it's not that we're starting out with everyone having the same status. No, we have certain people who apparently represent 1,000 land empires, and with landowners who haven't logged into Decentraland, who are passive investors for several years now, and so it's not that we are starting from scratch where everyone is starting at zero and they will now have to prove their intentions and their to build up a track record of what they can do and then benefit from the trust of the community. No, they actually per default demand to have a 1,000x voting power compared to other community members, right? So this was kind of the difference to other projects where the DAO is currently being implemented, and we can definitely have a look at what's going on at Gitcoin. I just happened to claim some free coins today over there, and one thing that I had to do to get the coins is to actually delegate my voting power. And I was thinking, how ironic is that? What a timing. And I realized that because I wasn't really engaged with the project, I just gave this voting power to just someone. But and this is probably not really good practice. Thank God I did not have that many coins to claim. But if I would have been inside that community, and if there would be a selection of people who have a great track record of doing the right thing, people who can dedicate the time, people who have the skills, and people that I know and people that I trust, If I wanted to pass on my voting power to them, I cannot say that this is a bad idea. I think this is not a bad idea. I think this could work. But the problem is, does this really apply to Decentraland as it is today? And if it does not, or if it does, what could we possibly do about that to make it work? And before we talk about that, I want to touch on the fear of, the other side of the camp, the people who are opposing that motion. And I have been definitely on that side yesterday, and I'm still on that side today. But I'm thinking of maybe soften my approach here because I see a scenario where this could be beneficial. So let's talk about this. So the fear was that the core fear is that the active community is currently investing a lot of mental and time energy into the Decentraland project. And the outcome of this effort is very visible to the outside world. People investing into Mana, into Decentraland, people setting up shop and HQs in Decentraland are looking at adoption numbers. They're looking at the activity level, at commits level. They want to know that something is happening in that world. They log in and they try to see what progress is being made. So that active community is a key component to the success of Decentraland, especially now this early on. And the fear is that if we introduce a DAO where that part of the community does not have any leverage, because in order for these guys, and we have seen that yesterday, to have any say in anything, they would have to create an emergency each single time and mobilize every single member of the community with all of the assets that they have available just to have a chance to counterbalance a larger voting power entity. Like we've seen it yesterday. Decentral Games came in with 2 million voting power, and until today, with all of the noise that we have made, we're still struggling to catch up and to properly counterbalance that vote. And we have only a couple of days to go. So the fear is not a fantasy, it's a reality. And this is just one key player that has done this yesterday. And I think we do not want the active community to feel like they do not matter, because once they start feeling this way, they will start disengaging. We will have less events, we will have less development, we will have less social media, we have everything less, until this downward spiral starts to affect the outside perception, and then the mana price, and then the land prices, and this will bite the opposition in the ass. So it's important to keep that segment of the decentralized community excited and relevant. And I think this is what we had tried to bring to the table yesterday. And it felt like the other side did not necessarily pick up on that, and they were mostly worried about discussing technical security issues, which are probably valid, but they did not address any of the concerns of the core part of the community that is really fundamental and important to Decentraland. And I don't think there is a so it's really hard to analyze this, but I feel like both sides have not necessarily had the opportunity to properly express what their fears and their ambitions are. And I think not everyone on that call understood that that the DAO is a tool that we are using to grow the universe, and that if you ignore one component that is currently really important, it's probably will it will probably create more damage than doing a certain set of concessions. And it's it's tough to analyze this, but I think it was important to kind of summarize this whole dilemma that we were going through. But now, having seen what Gitcoin is doing with their DAO and with their steward system, and how voting power delegation works, could work for them, I understand that it could have a place in Decentraland. But but in my opinion, and I hope other people will share it as well, if districts will pull their voting power from their individual investors and users, this has to happen consciously. People will have to log into wherever they log into within those district ecosystems and specifically understand to whom they're passing their voting power and what that entity or that person is going to achieve or is planning to do. And they should have the possibility to withdraw that voting power whenever they feel like we have seen on Gitcoin as well. And maybe potentially even pass on that voting power to an external party outside of the district, to a different district, or to an independent community member. If they have that liberty to use their voting power consciously and independently, then I would say, fine, I would actually be interested to see if this could be really beneficial for Decentraland. But what I wouldn't like to see is that per default, every district just having the multiplier of how many lands they have in the district automatically translated into their personal voting power. I wouldn't like to see it this way. It shouldn't be per default automatic. It should be a conscious action by each community member clicking a button, reading who that person is, what the plan is, agreeing to it, and then also have the liberty to take it away when they feel like it's not happening. And if this is how we're going to set it up, I think this could work. And then the last question, and I think I have to bring that question back up, is of course the original concern by the active community. If these districts are going to do a real good job, really mobilizing their communities, they will have an overwhelming power in Decentraland, and the active community today will lose in importance. And I think this is somewhat of a fear we had, and but it feels like to me that this, this is probably unavoidable, and we will have to win over people in other districts to become more active, to potentially join us, to potentially even pass on their voting power to select a new district leader if they feel like this is necessary. Like, if this is going to be as open as this, I think we will have to go with this proposal, because this would be the liquid democracy you guys were referring to, and I would be willing to see where it could take us. And I'm fully aware that it's going to be really hard to go back on something like this, but yeah. So I hope I did not miss any points I wanted to raise. This was a little bit of freestyle. Hopefully this was useful, guys. I don't know what you think about this. I'm curious to see what you can do with this information. Do subscribe to the channel if you find this kind of content useful. And of course, do hit the like button if this was good. Thank you, guys. I see you in sometime soon.